Have you ever been to Scotland? Up north are the Orkney Islands, and there are a great many seals. Now, these seals, they lie around on the beach and they float around and they swim around eating the fish around in down in the ocean. They plunge up, they go down, and they're very, very loved by the people in those islands. And actually, if you have ever been there, I've never been there, but I do know a few people who have. They are not called seals, but they're called selkies. And selkies are magical creatures. And like I said before, they are loved by the people of Orkney, except one. There was one man who didn't like them, who hated them. And that was because he was a fisherman. And as you know, fishermen, they go out in the evenings, they put their nets down and a floater is on top, and they would row out a little bit more, put another net with a floater on, and out a little bit more. And when morning came, he would row out again to pick up those nets to see if he had caught some fish to bring back to his family. But sometimes he would see that there were fish that were torn and half eaten. And sometimes he would go up and pick up another net, and it was completely teared. It was torn off with no fish at all, so torn that it was impossible to mend. Bloody selkies, he would say. Yeah, it was the selkies who would swim around those nets, eat those fish, and then disappear under the water. And many years had passed like this, and the hatred for these selkies in this man grew. And it grew so much that he wanted to kill them, skin them off, sell their fur, and then he would have more fish to bring home. So one day he decided to do that. One day he went out on his boat, put the net down, it went, floater on top of the ocean. He put out another net. And then he went back to shore and took out a huge knife. He put it inside his belt. He said, "This one is mine." He threw off his shirt and went back out to the water. And there he waited. And he waited hours until dead at night he saw the floater bubble down and up, bubble down and up. He said, there's fish there. He stealthily rowed his way to that net. He looked over, and there in the water, he saw a huge shadow. But since it was dead at night and only the moon could show what was there, he couldn't see exactly what it was. But by the way it moved and how it was grabbing the net, pulling it one side, pulling it to another, he said, "This is a selkie. This one's mine." And push, he plunged into the water. He swam and he swam and he swam until finally he saw it. Silver furred, beautiful flaps, as if it was gliding there. The Selkie was having a feast with the fish that he had worked so hard for. The man grabbed his knife. He swam powerfully to the Selkie, and with all the grudge and the hate in his heart, he plunged that knife into the Selkie's back. The Selkie immediately started to turn, and that knife tore down the Selkie's back, leaving a huge, long hole. Blood came out. But the fisherman did not let go, and that knife was very, very deeply plunged into the flesh of that Selkie. However, the Selkie was strong, and he twisted and turned and moved around until finally the fisherman could not do anything but let go. And down the Selkie went into the depths of the water. The man was almost out of breath. He couldn't go to where the Selkie was, so he started to swim up, 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 until he crashed out of the water, breathed in. Finally, he got rid of the Selkie. And with that, one less. Maybe he'll bobble up and I'll be able to grab him, skin him, use his fur. We'll wait until morning. The fisherman swam back to the boat and hauled himself back. The next morning, he went out and picked up those nets full of fish. Yes, finally, I have what I wanted. He rowed back, and wow, his family was so pleased to see what he had caught. The next day he went out, he put his nets, left them hours during the night, and then went back. But when he picked up those nets, they were empty. Well, sometimes happens to fishermen. Sometimes you catch, sometimes you don't. Didn't bother him. He went back. Next day, he went out. He pulled those nets down, left them hours back, came up, pulled them up. Nothing. Not one single fish. He went back. Next day, the same. And the day after that. Until finally, he knew he was cursed. The curse of the Selkies. Sitting down ashore, his boat beside him, his empty nets on the other, he looked out and thought what he was going to do. He brought this upon himself. But why did those Selkies have to eat his fish? Why couldn't they eat somebody else's? He didn't know. And the problem was he didn't know how to lift this curse. Until he felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned around and he looked up and he saw a man, a broad man, with a hat that was covering him. "Good day, my friend." The fisherman got up and said, "Good day, sir. You've come to buy some fish?" "No, no, 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 I haven't. Of course not." The fisherman breathed a sigh of relief. "Thank you, because, sir, I haven't been able to catch anything yet. But if you come tomorrow, perhaps I will have some." The man looked at him and said, "No, no, no, no. I haven't come for fish. I've come for selkies. I want to have somebody go catch those selkies, skin them off, and take their fur and give them to me." "You want me to hunt selkies? Oh, well, that's perfect. I am the man for the job," said the fisherman. And the man said, "Well, then, if you have time right now, we can go right now. I have a perfect place where we can go and hunt those selkies." And the fisherman said, "Yes, right now." So the man led him far from the shore, which was strange, but the fisherman didn't say anything. He crossed the island and went up to a cliff, and over this cliff was the ocean. And actually, the fisherman knew that spot. He knew that it was the best place to catch fish, but it was very much full of selkies. And the man said, "Well, you want to go?" The man looked down and said, "You want me to go there?" And the man, looking at the fisherman, smiled. He turned around, cupped his hands, and started to make an unearthly sound. Such a strange sound. The fisherman was astounded. Who was this? Who was this man? Again and again and again, the man wailed and made this sound until the fisherman, looking down that cliff, he saw all the selkies were splashing on top of the surface. The man grabbed the fisherman's shoulder and pushed him off the cliff. The fisherman tumbled down that cliff into the ocean. And when he tried to go up, the selkies caught him and dragged him down the ocean. The man knew, he knew what his fate was. And he tried with all his might to break free, but it was impossible. Down and down and down. He didn't want to let go of the precious air that was in his lungs. But he knew that he was running out of oxygen, and if he opened his mouth and let go, that would be the end of him. But the selkies did not let go until finally the man started to see pitch black, and he closed his eyes. The next moment, the fisherman opened his eyes and he looked around. He was on the ocean bed. And the water was surrounding him. He was breathing air. And what was more extraordinary was that around him there were no selkies, but men and women looking at him. Again, he felt a tap on his shoulder, and he saw the man that had brought him to the cliff. He said, Is this your knife? He said. The fisherman looked and thought that was the knife that he used against that Selkie that night. He said, yes. The man pushed him, and in the middle of that circle, of that gathering, on a rock, was the body of a young man. And he was gray, pale. He was dying. The man put up his finger and said, that's my son. You cut him up. With this knife, the fisherman knew that it was true. Said, yes. You want your revenge. The man got close to him and said, revenge? What would I do with revenge? My son would be gone, and there would be no use. So the man said, well, what do you want of me? He said, I want you to heal him. The man opened his eyes, said, how can I heal him? And the man said, very easily. All you have to do is pass your hand all the way down that wound, and he will heal. The fisherman looked at the boy, at that young man. He went up and he saw the cut from his shoulder all the way down to his groin. A gash that was so horrible. He extended his hand and started to touch that wound. And as his hand passed through the shoulder, the chest, the wound started to heal. The flesh started to knit. It was amazing. But as he went down, he also felt that coldness from that body soaking up through his arm, all the way up to his shoulder and to his chest and all the way up to his heart. And he knew that pain that only comes with death. And he felt how his hand was starting to numb. But he didn't stop. He went down and down until he had finished. By then, his whole arm was numb, and he could feel how darkness was starting to go around him, over his eyes. He knew that it was the end of him. But he also thought how he had hated so much those Selkies. He deserved this death. Until finally, darkness had overcome him, and he fell to the ground. The next morning, the fisherman woke up. He looked at the sky. It was clear. The sun was shining. He stood up. He looked around, and to his side were all his fishing nets, the ones that were broken. They were all new. He looked around again and he saw his boat right where he had left it. Kneeling down, he grabbed those nets. He thought, these are the ones that I had thrown away. It was no dream. Yes, it was no dream. And once again, he went out on his boat, left those nets, the floater, bobbing up and down, on the surface of the ocean. He went, he came back, and he started to lift those nets, and out came fish. And some of them were torn, and some of them were half eaten. But he didn't mind. How could he? These selkies needed to eat, just as he did, just as his family did, and just as you and I do. So remember, if you ever encounter a selkie, don't do it harm. It may just come back to you. And, well, who knows what can happen.